content.
So, all right. Welcome back, everybody, to Corn on the Macabre. We have a exciting special episode here today, kind of a werewolf extravaganza, if you will, and we have a very special guest joining us today, award-winning novelist, writer, director, actor, producer, kind of does a little bit of everything, Mr. Gregory Lamberson. So thanks for joining us, Greg.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Now that that's over
excellent. We're excited to hear it. And of course, as always, we've got Randy Favorite here and myself, Craig Gates. And I think we're just going to start off by Mr. Lamberson here has an Indigogo campaign going right now for his next film called Frenzy Moon. And it is a werewolf film. And I'll go ahead and let him kind of talk about that here, because we're definitely interested to hear anything and everything we can.
For sure.
Okay, well, I've written 3 werewolf novels, The Frenzy Way, The Frenzy War, and The Frenzy Wolves, and those were published by Medallion Press and got very good reviews in Publishers Weekly and from Fangoria, some both the mainstream and in the horror, and they were pretty popular. The publisher went out of business. They were very big-scale stories with a lot of action, with cops fighting werewolves in New York City, and I could never make one of those myself. It's just too ambitious. Would require a major budget. But I've always wanted to do a werewolf script, and in fact, the first of those Frenzy books, The Frenzy Way, started out as a screenplay that I wrote way back in 1986. I wrote it right after I finished shooting Slime City. And it sat in a drawer for a while, and then I turned it into a novel, and then the novel spawned 2 sequels. But as I said, there was no way I could turn one of those into a movie. But the first book had sort of a backstory for one of the characters, a guy who is a hunter and encounters a werewolf woman out in the woods. And for a time I thought, maybe I could just turn that section into a low-budget film. And then I was thinking about how different ways to make a commercial. And I said, well, it can't just be the hunter and the werewolf woman. I'd have to have, other people in the cabin. And if I want to make money, they should be younger, good-looking people. And so it kind of evolved from there. So it's not directly connected to the novels at all. It's a standalone thing. It's a cabin in the woods movie, which, that's a trope for a reason. It's a lot easier to control circumstances if you're in that one location. And it actually has a lot of similarities in my mind to John Carpenter's The Thing, because besides taking the Night of the Living Dead and Birds type situation where you have people confined inside arguing while there's a threat from outside trying to get in, there's also the paranoia that one of them might be one of the creatures too. So there's that whole who goes there element from John Carpenter's The Thing. And I wrote this about 8 years ago. I thought I would do it after my film Johnny Gruesome, but Richard Chismar got in touch with me about doing Widow's Point. And so I did that instead because it was good to work with him, and got my friend Craig Sheffer to star in that. And then, of course, we had a global pandemic. And shooting a werewolf movie with 7 actors in a cabin and a special effects crew, because it's a practical effects movie, that's part of the appeal, and a regular crew during COVID was not remotely possible, unless everybody was going to be walking around with a werewolf mask. It couldn't be done. So I had to postpone. I shot my action movie, Guns of Eden, instead. I did that one because it's a female Rambo, like First Blood, but 90% of it is set outdoors. So I knew I could do it safely. We still had to take precautions, but we were able to do it. And that film was actually pretty successful. I mean, on one streaming platform alone, over 5.5 million people have seen it. And for me, that's very good. It's very good. And, the industry has changed in that
absolutely.
For a while, Tubi was a way that independent filmmakers were making most of their money. Now it's these FAST, F-A-S-T channels that show movies uncut but have commercials in them and do revenue sharing. Right now, indies are actually doing better off that. So this is an unusual film, and that my profit participants are actually getting little checks from me, and I'm not used to handing those out. So it's a good feeling. In fact, the day the money comes in, my wife's the accountant in the company. I say, you got to write those checks right away. I have to go hand deliver them right now. And she doesn't understand what a good feeling it is for me after all these years to be able to give people some checks. So anyways, we have come out of that pandemic and it's safe to shoot again. And so I'm making this movie, and I had hoped to raise $500,000 to make this film. I wanted Craig Sheffer to be back. I wanted to shoot at SAG. I wanted to have a long shooting schedule. And I don't know a lot of rich people. I have one or two rich friends who have other rich friends, and I tasked one of them with trying to raise money. And after a year and a half, he was like, look, I can't do it. Everyone is nervous about this. They're nervous about that. Oh, the rich people are scared because Joe Biden's hiring extra IRS agents. Oh, no one's confident about the economy. But I had to let that scenario play out, because that was my plan, was to get investors. I wasn't planning to crowdfund again. I did a crowdfunding campaign for this project already, for development funds, to create certain special effects and shoot tests and commission work that could hopefully interest investors. And it didn't work. All that work will be used. So the money's not wasted. But I already did this campaign. So doing another one is not something I was looking forward to. And it took a couple of months to just get myself in the mindset that I was going to do this again, because when I do them, it's a lot of work. I mean, I'm pushing this thing all day long and thanking people and emailing people on the side. What else can I get you to do? It's a double time job for the month that it runs. And while I'm running this campaign, I'm getting the 10-year memories from Facebook, and it's showing me, oh yeah, this time 9 years ago, you were crowdfunding Killer Rack. This time 2 years ago, you were doing the Frenzy Moon. This time 3 years ago, you were crowdfunding Guns of Eden. And a year ago, I was crowdfunding for somebody else. I produced a comedy called Unbelievable about the Buffalo Bills fan base here. And that film is playing in like its 10th theater regionally. It's just playing in one theater after another. It's becoming everything I wanted it to become. But I don't crowdfund like 2 years in a row. And now I am, because I just did theirs last year. And it's a grind.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
You don't have to hand me tissue to wipe my tears. I mean, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying it's not the way I would like to do things. My chief failing as a filmmaker is that I've never had a producer who can go out and raise the money for me. I've had friends who were producers and kicked in some of their own money, which I appreciate, and I couldn't do the films without them. But I'm a producer only because I have no other choice. I want to write and direct. But no one's getting this money for me, so I have to go out and get it myself. I'm a member of the Producers Guild of America. You see PGA in the credits. As far as I know, I'm the only member in Buffalo, where I live. And it's just funny that I've achieved a certain level as a producer that I don't want. If I'm going to be a producer, I want the rich people coming to me and saying, oh, yeah, we want to make money doing this.
Exactly.
So I know that was a long monologue, but it covers a lot of bases, and it gives us room to build on.
I love to hear all that we can. I know that crowdfunding for the filmmakers is definitely a lot of extra work, and nobody likes going out asking for money to make their own film, or really ask for money for anything. But from a viewer and a consumer standpoint, there is a brighter side to that lets the fans and viewers do feel like they're more part of the project. And so there's a little give back on the opposite side of the camera that I know that especially the horror genre, a lot of people really enjoy, even though it's extra hard for the filmmakers to do. I'm excited to see that you're getting a chance to go at this again. Me personally, I've been a fan of the Frenzy universe, if you will, the storyline. The Frenzy Way is actually my personal favorite werewolf novel, like, of all. So it's kind of crazy to be sitting here and talking about it. And being such a massive werewolf fan, I've read endless amounts. So, but it was such an engaging read. So knowing that you're able to at least touch it a little bit in the film way is exciting. And I think everybody else should be excited too, because we all know the world is in desperate need of good werewolf movies. So
Oh yeah.
we just that pot is very small to pick from.
Blackout is out right now, and I haven't seen it yet. Larry Fessenden's movie, and I want to see it soon. Larry's a friend of mine.
Randy and I were just talking about that. It was about a week ago, I think, that we were talking about Larry Fessenden's new werewolf movie, Blackout, and I think that's one we're actually going to visit soon and do a video on, because we're excited about that. I've been a longtime fan of Mr. Fessenden and a lot of the work he's done. So that's another one we're excited about. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about the Frenzy Way or just the world in general?
Go ahead. Sure.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about that was created as it was a script you wrote way back in the day. And I know even in the book, it does mention it references a couple werewolf movies. There's a specific scene between the main character and his wife where I think they're even watching werewolf movies in their apartment while all the rest of the story is going on. But there's a character in the book that the main character had already caught, and there is, from a reader standpoint, a lot of Eddie Quist's qualities to that character. I just wonder, was that something you kind of pulled from The Howling, and how did that character kind of come about?
So that script in my mind was actually, because keep in mind I wrote it in 1986. It was a cross between, for me, the original Night Stalker TV movie. And, there's that scene where Darren McGavin is talking to his showgirl friend. She's a prostitute in the novel, but in the TV, they had to make her a casino girl, where they're looking through books and she's telling him her research. And so the modern interpretation of that would be watching videos. So that's what I did there. But I envisioned it as a cross between that and Hill Street Blues, which I was obsessed with. I watched every episode of Hill Street Blues. So all that cop action and that precinct action, and I think the gritty French Connection-like quality is definitely from Hill Street Blues. In terms of novels, The Howling is probably one of the only werewolf novels I ever read that I truly liked. And one of the things I like about the novel is that it's just an unpretentious B-movie book. It doesn't, even though it copies Salem's Lot in a lot of ways, it's a short book. It's got a few characters. It gets to the heart of things really fast. So, yeah, I mean, that was obviously an influence, and so is the movie, Eddie Quist. Although, even though I wanted that type of character who made those sort of jokes, in my mind, the character was going to be played by Chris Sarandon from Fright Night.
Ooh.
So I kind of saw him being a cross between Chris Sarandon and Eddie Quist. Wow. And I know we're going to get to all sorts of best ofs, but I definitely think Eddie Quist is the best werewolf there's ever been. His character. I'm not talking about makeup for the movie or anything else, but
I have to agree. Shit. I have to agree because Craig and I've been talking about this werewolf script that I wrote for a while, and I said, I want to do a werewolf film where I explore who Eddie Quist is. Who was he before? I mean, he was the Riverside Ripper, and so I wrote this script, and Craig followed along the entire journey of me writing that, and so that is something that we're trying to get funding to shoot that. So
So that's specifically movie Eddie Quist, or is that
No,
that?
it's a different character. It's just based on
No. But I mean, in your mind,
yeah.
is he a prequel to the movie Eddie Quist, who was a serial killer running around the city? Because he's a little different in the book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But here's my idea. I mean, Eddie was the genesis of the idea. What if a serial killer hunts down a werewolf just so he can get bit, so he can become a better serial killer?
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote that script.
Cool.
So
well,
yeah,
we're
we're big Howling fans.
8 years to get. And it's taking me longer than that to do some of the other ones. You just got to be persistent.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I've like right now I'm producing a huge film that they're going after. Oh, their other producers are saying, hey, 30 to 60 million. So I'm getting my hands dirty right now, and I got to talk with some other producers tomorrow, who Sound of Freedom, the guy who produced that. I got to talk with him tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
good luck.
And I'm out of my league here with all these talking with these filmmakers.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I've been pretty lucky in my life to work on several films, in every capacity I could possibly work. I've learned everything as far as filmmaking that I can, so that I can get whatever job on set that I need. So it's like Tom Savini says, the more you do, the more you get to do. That's true. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm learning the producing side. That's what I'm doing. Because that's the toughest, you know. How do you get money? Where do you go?
Mm-hmm.
And
everybody has a hard time. You know, people who start out think it's going to be so easy.
Oh, yeah.
And I always tell them, you know, Martin Scorsese has to wait years to do different films because even he has to wait.
Yep.
Of course, he wants 200 million to make his movies now, and
Yeah.
that makes things a little harder.
Yes. Yeah.
Even though independent filmmaking is hard, a lot of times with big Hollywood films, there ends up being a problem with the companies and producers getting involved and end up quasi destroying, you know, the director and the writer's original, ideas and story for it. So I always like independent films and the fact that when I go to watch it, I know in my heart a lot of that, what makes it in the film is the vision, or as much as the vision as the writer and director could actually get into the film without it being messed with too much.
Yeah, and adapting a novel is hard to do, and you know, I'm helping with that on this big budget film also. You know, because you want to be true to the source material. I mean, at least I do. And
I did have a couple more questions about Frenzy Way, real quick. Going back to that, Greg, I know you mentioned, it's kind of in the style of a B movie. It's a very B movie horror novel. A lot of action, kind of gets straight to the point. Not a whole ton of characters. For me as a reader, that's where it kind of shines, though, because you get the chance to get involved with these characters. You feel connected to them. And going off of that, for me, one of my favorite and most intense parts of this book, or just really in general and overall shocking, is one of the characters who's a police officer that it kind of goes in to a bar to lure out what they think at the time is a serial killer, and that leads to this attack happening in the vehicle. And for me, that's not something I've ever seen or read before, or at least not quite exactly the way. That character felt very much like almost a main character, a very large supporting character up to that point. was that something you had kind of mapped out from the beginning, or is that something that, you know, the story just kind of took you there? Or how did you plan out that whole scene where that happens?
The bones of that story did exist in the screenplay I wrote. I expanded it greatly, like all the stuff about the Native American mythology and stuff. That's all research I did years later that really expand. In fact, the title, The Frenzy Way, came from that ritual. So the script wasn't called that. The script was called The Greenwich Village Monster. And I didn't want people to know it was a werewolf at first. That's my way of writing in general, is to have loose plot points and improvise until I get to them and try and surprise myself. And I don't remember if I had planned to kill that character or not. But I did know it did happen in the script. So for the book, I knew that. And for the book, the great thing about a novel is you do have more time to develop the characters. As Randy was saying, in my script, he's just an Eddie Quist type character. But as you know, in the novel, I give the whole backstory. You have flashbacks to show the origins of everything he goes through. So he's a really well-developed character, I think. The novel gave me the freedom to really develop the character that you're referring to, who gets killed, to really make her, I'll say it, seem like a pivotal character. And there are, I would say, 5 main characters in that book, and she's one of them. And, you know, we hate to kill off good characters, but at the same point, it's a horror novel, you know?
Yeah.
They can't just be anonymous people who buy it. There's got to be, and, you know, my daughter is going to be a writer. She's going to Cornell soon, but I've been telling her for a couple of years, she always gets upset when characters get killed. And I always explain, that makes the situation that more serious. It makes it that much harder for the hero. It just raises the stakes so much, and involves the audience on a more emotional level. And real horror, and I'm not talking about like the campy films that I do, but in the novels that I do, I try to do this. The appeal is that it allows us to deal with emotions on a grand scale that regular drama doesn't permit. Everything's just so extreme and exaggerated, and that's one of the things that appeals to me about the genre.
One of the best advice I'd ever received, it was for curing writer's block, is kill a character and then deal with that and see what happens. I'm like, oh wow, that'll work. So I actually did it, and I'm like, that the implications of that, you know, leads to this, and then that leads to that, and then, you know, when you write a story, it does take on a life of its own a lot of times. And when you're making a film, it takes on a life of its own when you're shooting it, and then when you edit it, it takes on it keeps evolving and changing. And sometimes it doesn't really resemble what you thought it would, and sometimes it's a lot better than you thought, you know. So
very often writers come up with a key scene or a key moment that inspires a whole story, and as the story develops, that moment becomes almost forced. Like they got to try and keep it in there, and by the end, it's got to go.
Yeah.
So it served its purpose, but it's no longer relevant to what the project became.
Yes, and I've tried to tell writers this too. You have to be able to evolve, you know, as a writer, and stop being married to this scene or that scene. And if it has no bearing, no weight on the story, get rid of it. You know. And I've fought with writers recently, actually, about that. You know, I mean, he was yelling at me, and I'm like, look, I'm just trying to help, you know. But yeah, so you have to evolve with the story.
I do some freelancing work. I rewrite scripts, I ghostwrite scripts, and one of the ones that I recently rewrote. I mean, really, I had to break it down and start over almost from square one, because the writer was not a screenwriter. He never studied screenwriting. One scene didn't lead into another. I would literally take 4 scenes that would stop. It would seem like they built to their logical conclusion, and they would start over,
Yes.
and then they would wind up back where we were, and whatever evolution there was gone. So I would break down these long script scenes, and I would just say, what is this scene really about? And if I could save one line of dialogue, I felt like I was servicing them.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the responses that I kept getting was, well, this line has to go in here because this really happened in real life. And I would say, it may have happened in real life, but it's not interesting.
Right.
And it's not enough to sustain what you think it is.
Exactly.
And when I'm writing for somebody else, I'll try and make them see the logic of that once. But if they're adamant, I just have to let it go and move on, because at that point, I just want to finish the project.
I get it.
So,
So what do we want to do
in talking
By the way, I
about
thought Gary Branner's
Yeah.
novel was a B movie. It could be, not mine, The Frenzy Way. No, The Frenzy Way is a huge action piece. It's the French Connection. It's not. It's not the little town behind Salem's Lot like the Howling novel is.
Yeah. So who's your Popeye Doyle character?
Yeah, the book.
Well, the character is a cop.
Yeah. So there's a cop. There's a cop in mine too. Well, there's 2 cops, and I had no clue what was going to happen to one of them.
Well, I had no idea mine was going to be a series. I mean, I wrote the one novel and did really well, and they said, "How about another one?" And I was like, "Well, if I do a second one, there has to be a third one, because if I take this story, it's going to be very big."
Yeah.
And that's the way it was. I mean, it could have gone beyond that, but they were changing into a different kind of media company and getting away from publishing. So I wrapped it up in the third one, and I was happy to.
So another thing about that kind of leads us into film wise is one of the most interesting things to me was the backstory of the main antagonists. You dive into the backstory with the Native American history and things like that, but there's a specific point where you really go into the character learning how to change, and it's like a process, and it's explained, and we go into explaining how it feels to the character, at what times they do it, starting out how it's extremely painful, and then the more the character does it, it becomes easier each time the change. That's a really interesting and exciting way to explain it, things that we don't really see very often in film or novels. If you were going to make that, was that a main part of the script also? And how important would be actual transformation scenes within the movie? Because, a big part of every werewolf movie is, you got to have a big transformation scene.
So in terms of the novel, that's the whole idea of doing the backstory of that character was really just a way to expand a 90-page script and to make sure it was long enough to be a novel. And there was a lot of opportunity there. And at that point, I was reading a lot of novels, ninja books, action books. David Morrell, who wrote First Blood, did one called Brotherhood of the Rose, espionage thrillers. And a lot of these stories really had origin stories that took characters from teenage years to adulthood and stuff. So, I mean, that was something I was reading a lot, and I wanted to apply that to the genre. Horror very typically takes place over one night or 1 week, because you want to be able to skirt the issue of constant exposition with the authorities and this and that. It's okay to have cops there if they're behind the 8 ball, but to have to keep forcing it through what would happen in the real world, the bureaucracy and all the different departments and all the people who be involved. You want to keep it to like a couple of main characters. That's one of the ways that we cheat. But with a novel, you don't have to do that. You can do all that stuff. The Night Stalker movie did it very well, but the Night Stalker novel also did it well, showing the whole Las Vegas politics and the police and everything that was clamping down on Kolchak, making his life miserable. They did a great job in that. I'm not focused on that in my story, because my story is from the point of view of the people who are trapped in the cabin, accepting that there's werewolves out there. It's a whole pack trying to get in. We suspect one of them might be a werewolf. There is a big transformation scene. You have to have it. It's a character who transforms halfway before the shit hits the fan. It's not a full-on transformation, but haven't figured out how we're going to do it yet. But we know that it's at that point the characters are in a cabin and the electricity's gone out, so everything's lit by a flickering fireplace.
Oh, nice.
So we know that flickering light will play a role in how we pull this off.
Nice.
My cinematographer is the guy who does all the graphics that you see on the campaigns and stuff, and shoots some pretty cool stuff. He's going to come up with something. I don't know what it is yet, but I tell him what I think it's going to be, and it'll inspire him to go off in a different direction, and he'll tell me what he wants to do. We were going to try something on Widow's Point that maybe I'll try on this. If you remember the 1931 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Frederick March, not the one with Spencer Tracy. They had this very unique way that they did the transformation live in camera using filters,
red and green,
and changing the filters so stuff revealed. And Chris Cosgrove is his name. He wanted to do something similar to that with digital technology, and we ended up not for the ghosts. We ended up not doing that, but I think we're going to do some tests and see if that's something we can use for part of our transformation in this.
I love it.
So by changing the filters, just seeing stuff starting to change on the face live.
Yeah, and I love going back to that obsolete technology, that technology that people have long forgotten. And I grew up doing makeup effects and everything also, which leads me to my next question. Who's your makeup crew?
So I'm in Buffalo, and my makeup guys are in Rochester, which is an hour away. And the main guy's name is John Vincent. And John Vincent worked out in L.A. for many years, and he worked under Dave Allen, the stop-motion animator. So he did stop-motion on not Robot Jocks, but Robot Wars.
Okay.
He did some stop-motion in Freaked. So he worked Dr. Mordred he was involved with. Remember Charles Band's ripoff of Doctor Strange, Dr. Mordred, with what's his name, who played Herbert West in the Reanimator films?
Jeffrey Combs.
The two of these guys primarily, Jeffrey Combs, right? They specialize in animation, stop motion animation, and rod puppets, and they are going to build the full werewolf. And I do love the design they've come up with. Nice. It's a big part of my budget, obviously, and going from a $500,000 film to maybe $100,000 film when all is said and done is a huge cut. But the makeup's still going to cost what the makeup's going to cost. It's still going to cost to build this animatronic suit, and that's what it has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I once priced out CGI. At one point, a friend of mine who's a very successful filmmaker, he's directed 60 films. A lot of Asylum, a lot of cable TV stuff, a lot of stuff. He told me, oh, you're like me, you like the practical effects werewolves, but nobody will finance that. Sci-Fi Channel, they will not pick up anything that doesn't have CGI werewolves. So for about 48 hours, I entertained the notion, just seeing what it would cost in case somebody with money wanted to give me money to make a film. And the cost of making a 3D model and then of each shot and then of doing a close-up of the shot, it costs more because there's more detail. You go well over $100,000. So I want to do a practical effects werewolf. I decided, way before money became an issue, I said, no, this is not what I want to make. Right. Why would I do it? I know what fans want to see.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of what the Sci-Fi Channel wants. Yeah. Everybody wants a practical effects werewolf. They want a good practical effect werewolf, though. That's the trick. Yes. It has to be good. Yes. A werewolf movie is only as good as its werewolf.
Exactly.
So I'm very happy with the design these guys came up with. And the reason I'm doing this crowdfunding campaign really is so that I can put them to work building the werewolves over the summer. I can't shoot the movie until fall anyway, so I'm going to give them the whole summer so that they can do most of the work themselves. If I gave them a tighter schedule, they'd have to hire more people. It would drive my budget up.
Right.
So within the budget that they're willing to work with me, the longer they have, the better. So I'm going to give them the whole summer. That's the main thing that this campaign is for. And then there are other possible sources of financing that depend, they still hinge on me succeeding with this campaign. So I could never make, the campaign's for 30 grand. I could never make this film for 30 grand. I can make it for 100 grand. But I just made it for what I knew I would need to get us through the summer building the effects.
Right.
And if I hit it, I know this other money's coming in. If I don't hit it, I'm going to beg for this other money to come in, and we'll just see how that all plays out. But I'm not trying to raise $30,000 to make the whole movie. I'm raising $30,000 to make the Werewolf. Essentially, is what it comes down to.
I get it. Yeah, and giving your makeup crew time to do that. We live in a world where, this last picture I was on, I was production designer and makeup artist, and that's a lot to do. But I show up on set, and I'm staying there, so it's not in the same state that I'm living in, and there was an effect in the film where the top of somebody's head had to come off, and I'm like, it's going to cost X amount of dollars just the materials to do that, and it's going to cost more than 2 weeks for me to do the effect. Plus, you gotta fly the actor to me so I can cast his head, so I can do this and this and this. And they're like, so does this mean you can't do it? I'm like, if I had the money and the time, yes, I can do it. So I'm like, you decide what you want to do. We're 2 weeks away, and because when I get to Illinois, I'm not going to be able to do the effect there while we're shooting. I mean, create the effect, do all the prosthetics and everything. So they're like, oh, he just wants more money. I'm like, no, I don't want more money. I want time and the money, for the supplies. So it was a nightmare. But anyway, we ended up pulling off something different. But I almost vomited from what we did. So I think that scene will be really good. But
I'm 2 weeks away now from my 40th anniversary of working in film. So in 2 weeks, it will be 40 years since I set on foot a movie called I Was a Teenage Zombie that I was a production manager on.
Nice.
2 years later, I did my first film, Slime City. That summer of Slime City, for about a month and a half, I used to ride my bike from my apartment in Brooklyn to the Brooklyn Effects Studio, where the two guys were making the prop brain and the mechanical head. And it was my first film, so obviously it was a lot of fun for me. But that was the most fun I've ever had on a film. It was just going and seeing the stuff being built, seeing what the process was. Having read about it in the magazines and seen so many videos, but to be there smelling the latex and getting shit on my hands and stuff. For me, that's what it's all about. But a second side story out of that is one of the guys who helped out the main two guys. His name was Dan Fry. Now he's a special effects artist in England. He was just a kid younger than me when I was a kid when we made this movie, but he lived with me for a while after that. And he got a job working on Larry Cohen's Return to Salem's Lot and Island of the Alive. It's Alive Part 3. Not the films shot in the locations, but the sequences just shot in New York City. Wasn't given a script, wasn't given prep, wasn't given anything. Shows up, and Larry Cohen says, you know what? I've decided that when this woman is giving birth to one of the It's Alive babies in the first scene, I want to show the head of the baby coming out between her legs. And we got to shoot that in 2 hours. So figure out how you're going to do it. This guy's like, I'm being given a bit of a test here. And he ended up running to the store and buying a ball and cutting it in half and putting a pump in so that a pulsating half ball would show between the woman's legs. And I don't remember how it looked, but it was just such a funny story to me that this legendary Larry Cohen, who had made so many movies, it didn't matter to him to give the effects guys a little notice of what they had to do on the day.
It's funny you would talk about Larry Cohen because Craig and I we're gonna do a top 10 list of favorite cheesy movies, that we think should be remade, and Q is like one of is on my list. I would love to see a remake of Q, but anyway.
I have real affinity for Q. My uncle was in distribution, and when I was a senior in high school, he sent me the shirt with
Yes.
Q is coming. And that shirt for the year of high school and my first year of film school was the biggest conversation starter. What's Q? What's Q? Everybody wanted to know it. And then it came out that year, my first year in New York City, and Q is coming was all over the subway platforms. And then the movie came out, and one of my teachers said, "You've got to go see this film because it uses every possible location in New York City. There's buildings I've always wanted to shoot that I've never seen in movies, and it's in this movie." And that's a really good film.
I love it. I love it.
Werewolf films overall. I mean, so you can't not ask the question of everybody's favorite werewolf film, and I'm sure everybody has. There's if you go a little bit older, there's like 3 that you're going to get the answer of from somebody. But of course, we got to ask. So, Gregory, what's your top werewolf film of all time?
So it's not going to surprise anybody, I'm sure. I actually saw both An American Werewolf in London and The Howling, like opening weekends when they came out. I saw them first run on a screen, and I've seen them on a screen many times since then. For me, it's An American Werewolf. The humor is just so natural to me, and I think The Howling, in some ways, is a better film. But for me, the humor in The Howling keeps getting in the way. I don't like that wink, wink at the camera. I don't like the campiness. I don't like the constant campy jokes throughout. It gets in the way for me. The last time I watched it, it didn't bother me. But for me, it's still An American Werewolf. But you got to watch. You know what? You watch one and then you watch the other. You have to see them in pairs. They're like boobs.
That's right.
In Woody Allen's movie, Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex.
Yeah.
They get rid of the giant boob at the end and say, "Oh, but boobs always come in pairs."
I have to agree with that. The werewolves, that Rob Bottin created for The Howling are spectacular. They're great, and so is Rick.
The design, is awesome.
so is Rick Baker's.
Amazing.
It's like,
But if you watch the transformations, that one in The Howling, it really does go on forever.
Yeah, it does.
And you really do see how phony the head is because they dwell on it for so long. Like, it could have been edited tighter and it would have been better.
I agree.
It's such a great scene that it doesn't matter. And you sit there and you're like, oh, well, that Eddie Quist right there, that's a wooden head with some change-o things on it. It's not even latex. It looks rigid wood. But it doesn't hurt the film because it's still so effective. The lighting is so good. The werewolves look so good. I like the werewolves in that one better than I like the Hellbeast in American Werewolf in London. I just think American Werewolf in London has a better story until the very end. I think they wrap things up a little too quickly.
Yeah.
It's very abrupt when they shoot him and it's over.
Yeah. I agree. But
it was interesting. I watched. I've been watching clips. I haven't been watching the whole films, but I watched the clips of the remake of The Wolfman again, the one that Benicio is in. And the transformation is really good. There's a lot of good stuff in it. I don't really like some of the goofy jokes, but it was funny to see the rampage in London and just how influenced it was by the London rampage in American Werewolf in London. Just set in a period piece with a lot of CGI.
Yeah, and that's a movie that everyone trashed when it came out. I do too. I love.
Yeah,
I like the extended.
Yes. I'm glad they took out the scene where the woman is singing, and the Wolfman comes up to her and it was lost there. It's like, okay, so I'm glad they took that out, but.
It's stunning to me that film was made in 2010.
Yeah.
14 years old already.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It's crazy because I agree on all fronts. American Werewolf is my favorite werewolf film. It's much like you guys have said. I think it's a better movie. Transformation scene. I think it's just never going to be topped. However, I am more of a bipedal werewolf fan. I like the 7-8 foot tall two-legged werewolf design more than the 4 foot hell beast hellhound design in American Werewolf. But I know growing up, the humor always seemed off in The Howling, but also at the same time it scared me more than American Werewolf did. Just because overall tone sometimes felt much darker, especially with the opening with Eddie Quist in the porn shop and things like that. And I think
faces the other female character to
it's
terrifying.
Yes,
and she chops her hand and
yes. I think I think the only thing that to this day still bothers me a little bit is the werewolf design at the very end when she transforms on the news on the newscast. That's like the one thing that I'm like, I just wish it wasn't so cute. I guess
it's funny. It's very similar to the Zira makeup in the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, where they have to make, because Helena Bonham Carter was his wife or girlfriend. She still had to be beautiful as a chimpanzee, so they wouldn't fully commit to the makeup. And all the other apes around her are amazing.
What are some other than the top ones like American Werewolf, The Howling, and of course the original Wolfman? Those are all always highly lauded films. What are some other ones that you have enjoyed over the years, Greg, that you return to watch?
I love Ginger Snaps. Ginger Snaps is a great movie. And the sequels, I mean, I don't really like either of them, but they were both really interesting to watch once because they were so different. But the first one is really a great movie. The Wolfen, obviously that's a little different, but that's like the also ran with American Werewolf and The Howling because it came out in that same period. Of the ones that I've seen the last few years that are more recent, I really liked I think it's English, the one that's set on the train.
Howl.
Oh, Howl.
Yeah.
That had a lot. Had a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on? Oh, what the heck? What's the werewolf one with it takes place in Ireland? That the military. Dog soldiers.
Dog soldiers. Yeah.
Dog soldiers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love Dog Soldiers when I can see it with subtitles because I can't understand a fucking thing those guys are saying in that movie. I really can't follow the dialogue.
It's hard.
But it's a great film, and I think of the ones we've mentioned, it's probably the biggest, the one that's the most similar to my movie, Frenzy Moon, because mine is also in a cabin. It's just not soldiers.
Right.
It's people. It's specifically people who don't have the weapons fighting the werewolves, but it's got that same sort of setup.
What about Jack Nicholson's Wolf? What do you think of that?
I think that's a surprisingly good, not so good movie. It's got a lot of really interesting character stuff. It's really watchable. And then all of a sudden it's Jack Nicholson in not really committed makeup and James Spader jumping through the air on wires. It goes off the rails a little bit. It's like either be the smart comedy that it was in the first half or commit to the werewolves fighting. But I think it's a surprisingly enjoyable film, and it's because of all the talent.
Yeah, I think I walked out of the theater and I said to one of my friends after seeing that, because they're like, "Well, what'd you think?" And I said, "Well, I was expecting a werewolf movie, not a Wolfman movie."
So, and the makeup is amazing. It's just very old fashioned and doesn't advance things at all.
Right.
And you can understand. I mean, obviously, you have Jack Nicholson. The logic is you don't need special effects. I get it. I think it was more just the wire and the jumping through, and it didn't seem like that kind of movie until the end. I don't know if they did reshoots on that.
I'd have to agree with that.
Anytime it's on late at night and I put it on, I will watch it until I fall asleep.
There you go. There you go. Yeah,
keep watching it. You know, it's worth it getting it to when he pisses on that guy in the bathroom.
Yeah.
When he marks his territory. So many of these movies, Jack Nicholson is Jack Nicholson from in The Shining and in Batman and stuff. In that one, he actually plays a character in the beginning, this guy that people dump on, and he's kind of a nebbish, and he turns into Jack Nicholson. Yes. So at least, you know, he gets to do something a little interesting.
Yeah, they really played up that, you know, the male journey, you know.
One I always return to.
I don't want to see it again. I'm just talking about it.
Right. Yeah, every time we do a podcast, I end up watching something that we talk about. Never fails. One of my favorites that I always return to is Bad Moon. Is a personal favorite of mine. Yeah. Even though that transformation scene is awful at the end, but overall, Bad Moon is fantastic to me. I love the werewolf in Bad Moon.
Yeah, it's a great werewolf. Great werewolf.
Somehow I missed that completely when it was first out and released on physical media. When I started watching maybe Tubi 3-4 years ago, it was the first time I watched it, and I've seen it 10 times since then. Like I watched it 3 times that week. It was so good. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And, you know, the transformation was shitty, but the werewolf itself was amazing.
Yeah.
Steve Johnson. The werewolf kind of makes up for it.
Yeah.
Scream Factory did a release on Blu-ray, and they had Eric Red come in, and they kind of cut the transformation scene, so they cut some chunks out of it and re-edited it, and so it's much more watchable. I mean, it's still bad, but it's much better now. If you catch that version of it, it definitely helped it out. But I think Bad Moon has one of the most intense opening sequences, because when they're out in Nepal or whatever it is, and that werewolf just absolutely shreds that woman, and I think that's like one of the most realistic and brutal like werewolf attacks I think I've seen on film. I love the opening of that. What's a more recent one? We even did a video on it. The Cursed. I mean, that you could argue that's not as werewolf-esque as a lot of our stuff, but I really enjoyed The Cursed. I think the original title was 8 for Silver.
Oh yeah. The Cursed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Christina Ricci?
No.
Oh no. The period piece, right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I remember Chris Alexander saying he loved it.
I love it. It's not
fantastic
so much
movie.
A werewolf as more of a demon type creature.
Yeah. It's it plays with the werewolf mythos a lot, and it makes it very folklore fearing. I think it's a fantastic film.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is.
Gregor, do you have any other werewolf novels that you've enjoyed?
It's funny, I was just thinking of one. I read it only because Stephen King recommended it in Don's Macabre, and Thomas Walker wrote it, and it's called The Night Walker. And it's about an American who's in London. It's about an American werewolf in London. And he's a Vietnam vet, and he has like nightmares about being a zombie or fighting a zombie. And it's all from his point of view. No one sees a werewolf, so you don't know if he's really turning into a werewolf or not. But it's got an exciting chase through the ice and the sewer, and has a great ending. And again, at the ending, it ends from his point of view. You don't know if he was ever really a werewolf or not.
Interesting.
So it's set up so that you think I think it's told in first person. So Thomas Walker, The Night Walker.
Excellent.
And Stephen King called it the greatest werewolf novel ever written. Of course, this was in 1980, 82. Others came out after then, but up to that point, I guess he was correct. And a fairly short novel.
Excellent. That'll be a good recommendation for ourselves and as well as our viewers.
Yeah.
Ray Garton sadly passed away a week and a half ago, and he had written a werewolf novel that I read and enjoyed. I've forgotten the title.
Bestial.
Ray wrote everything. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think
it's actually. Oh, also, my friend Jeff Strand has at least 2 books called Wolf Hunt, which are humorous werewolf novels. He may have done a 3rd one too. Those are a lot of fun. The first one is about 2 guys that are hired to transport, they don't know what, a cage across state lines and deliver it somewhere. And it turns out to be a guy who's in a cage, and of course he's a werewolf, and he's messing with them. And once he gets loose, they have to catch him, or the mafia is going to be after them, and they don't know what they're getting into.
So yes, well, I think we got a chance to talk about Gregory's new film coming out that the Indigo campaign is out there for. We'll make sure and include the link to that in the description for our video here.
I'm halfway through it. 14 days. 17 more to go.
Oh, 17 more to go. So get on there and check it out. Watch the proof of concept video. Of course, get on there and crowdfund. I know once we're done here, I'm going to go in and crowdfund myself and pick out one of the perks. A lot of cool stuff on there to choose from. So definitely get on there and check it out. I'm definitely excited for Frenzy Moon.
And specials every Werewolf Wednesday.
Every Werewolf Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
I love Werewolf Wednesday.
Link in the description. We also shared it on a Facebook page too. We're supporters of it on there as well, so you can get the link from there. I think it's probably time we start wrapping things up. Gregory, I have one last question for you. Putting money aside, saying that you got all the funding that you would want, what would be your absolute dream project, film-wise?
Well, I have 2. One is, my novels, the Jake Hellman Files. It's a 6-book series. I developed it for a couple of different people as a TV show. I would love to see it become a series. That we had Michael Rooker was attached at one point. I thought Michael Rooker was way too old for the part, but Michael Rooker was attached at one point, and the reason it didn't go, it had a lot of interest in Canada. The filmmaker who was trying to get it done was George Mihalko, who directed the original My Bloody Valentine, and he's done a lot. But the problem in Canada was me, because as an American creator, it reduced the size of the tax credit they would have gotten. So the companies that they dealt with only wanted things created by Canadians. So I'd love to see that get done, but I'd love to see somebody else do it. In terms of my own projects, I wrote a novella called Carnage Road, which was a zombie novella set in like a George Romero type universe, and it was specifically about 2 bikers going across the country, like Easy Rider, rediscovering America, but during the zombie apocalypse. Wow. And Craig Sheffer optioned it for a while, and we developed that as a movie and a TV series, and it went off in all sorts of weird directions. But I would really like to do that as a film, and that's what I'm going to try to do next. Now, I know everyone's sick of zombies, but I believe it's a different enough take, and it's got a Road Warrior vibe with the bikers and stuff that I think it could be something special.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've been approached about
go ahead, Randy.
Doing
sorry,
a 1950s retro black and white zombie film. I'm like, yeah, I'm not into zombie films, but anything that is different enough, I'll jump on board. So.
Well, I've only got so many left that I can direct, and Romero was, my inspiration really as a filmmaker getting into things. I mean, he really was. That I wouldn't mind if that's the one I had to go out on. I'll still keep writing and producing, but the directing, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work directing a movie, and it's harder if you don't have the money you need. And it's harder still if you're producing and directing, because you're worrying about lunch and stuff like that when you want to be concentrating on the
Right.
creative.
Yeah,
end,
like
so
3 hours night or 3 hours of sleep a night while you're shooting, just it wears you down. Wears you down quick.
absolutely. I love it. I wish I could do one every year. It's just so hard getting money. And you know, I know this one that I'm doing now will be the best film I've done. Me and my cinematographer worked out all sorts of really visual shots that are going to set it above anything else I've done. But I'd like to do something bigger after that. You know, I wasn't counting on doing this one for $100,000, so I'd like to get something much bigger for the next one. We'll see. So it's always the chase.
For sure.
Well, I know from a viewer and consumer standpoint, I can definitely say, and I know I speak for a lot of the horror fans, that we are extremely thankful that filmmakers like yourselves constantly are on the grind out there trying to give us new films. We know you guys work your asses off to continue to give us things to enjoy. So from that standpoint, very much appreciated.
Well, you know, if the money was there just to keep making the projects, all of us would. You know, Lloyd is going to do another movie. Everyone thought Shakespeare's Shitstorm was going to be it for him. He thought it was going to be it for him, and he's going to direct another one. So, I mean, we keep going. You know, Lloyd's older than me, but we started out more or less, you know, just a few years apart.
All right, guys. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground. We got to talk about werewolves. We got to talk about Greg's new movie. Again, make sure you go check out the Indiegogo campaign for Frenzy Moon. We'll include a link in our comments. Go support indie filmmaking, support werewolves, and of course,
For sure.
we really appreciate you joining us for another episode of Corn on the Macabre. We always enjoy doing new videos, and we're extremely thankful that Greg was able to join us today. Super honored for him to come on here and talk with us and chat with us, answer some questions, and just hang out and talk about werewolves. So we very much appreciate it.
Yes.
Happy to have been here.
All righty. Like, share, and subscribe.